let me pivot to another position, but still a weapon for the offense. Let's just say, for the sake of discussion, because this realistically could happen. Let's say Jackson Smith, Najigba, and Addison, and Johnson, and even Flowers. Let's say somebody gets them at 22, 23. Those four receivers are gone, and you don't have a first-round grade on anyone else.
Yeah.
Would you be okay with this team is currently destructive, which I suppose comes down to what you think of Quentin Morris? But let's say Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, and Darnell Washington from Georgia. I'm a big fan of him. One of those three guys, even though the Bills have Dawson Knox and they gave him a big contract, where would you be at if the Bills said, you know what, I really like this tight end, and we're gonna have two tight end sets allowed, we're gonna switch some shit up, and they took a tight end? Or do you think that's a bad allocation of resources with your first round pick?
It's not, somewhere in the middle. It's not my least favorite idea. It's definitely not my favorite idea, though. I think this team got consumed last year with, instead of investing in receiver, we'll invest in pass catchers. And like Quentin Morris last year played more snaps at wide receiver than he did tight end for this team. And Nyheim Hines played more snaps at wide receiver than he did running back. How'd that go?
Not great.
They're not receivers. So for me, if it were to replace a receiver, it's not my favorite idea whatsoever. If they just did it because they had a first-round grade on the guy and there were no first-round receivers that they had, and they did want to do it, it just didn't fall right for them, and they do plan on doing it in the future, then I'm okay with it. As long as this team is just not opposed to investing heavily behind Diggs at receiver. But I just wouldn't want it to replace it. And I would say expectations shouldn't be that high if they were to do that. Washington or whoever, like the nature of the tight end position is it takes years for those guys to develop 99% of the time. I looked this up recently that in the last decade, there are only 2 rookie tight ends that have had more than 700 receiving yards. 2.
Really?
In 10 years. It was Kyle Pitts at 1,000, and Evan Ingram had like 715 for the Giants. And that's it. Everybody else, it takes a couple years. Travis Kelce, it took a couple years. Gronk actually might predate that. Gronk might have been one of the last guys that like balled out as a rookie. But for the most part, you just can't expect big expectations right away. So I'm not saying the guy wouldn't contribute, and maybe he'd be like the red zone offense struggled last year. He doesn't have to get 700 receiving yards. They could draft Darnell Washington. He has 400 receiving yards, but he has 8 touchdowns by the red zone, and that's worth it. I would want to manage expectations for how big a role that player would play in their offense.